Hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining everybody for another Tuesday discussion. Here on Tuesdays, we do like to make content related to questions or comments we are getting from either YouTube, Instagram, or our wonderful Patreon community. And today's comments and questions are all about price and quality of whiskey, essentially asking me if it was true that if I spend more on whiskey, I'm going to be getting a better product. What I'm going to show you is a whole lot of data that we have here behind the scenes for the channel that essentially shows that price and quality aren't as correlated as you might think they are. Or this is going to confirm some of your suspicions, but we have hard data to prove it, at least according to our three palates. So thank you for joining me today, whiskey friends. Let's kick off the show. All right. Well, I'm going to pull up some slides here to help me with today's conversation, but today's conversation did come directly from a patron who we actually provide our database to. So all of our scores, what type of whiskey it is, what's the proof, what's the price, all of these stats. And people do like to run pivot tables and point things out to me from time to time, which led to an interesting discussion about the correlation or lack thereof between price and our scores. And I wanted to walk through that. I thought it'd be an interesting topic for more to get into, and I'll use these slides here to guide us through the conversation. So if you've been on the channel before, you know that we do extensive reviews every single week, and we always walk through the experience and highlight these scores. And what you're seeing here then is essentially our scoring system. We have 10 metrics on a Google form, and every time Kelsey Durrell and I sit down and we're ready to review a whiskey, we go through that form meticulously to rate these things, to put down our flavor notes, to put down the proof, put down the price, put down the distillery, everything that we can classify. That way, once it's all in a big database and we get enough data, we can cut it like we're going to do in today's video and presentation. So here are the components that we do rate. We walk through the nose, we walk through each step of the palate, we walk through the whiskey overall in terms of balance and value. And as we're going through it too, each component has a flavor or an experience. The flavor is just how enjoyable it was each step of the way. The experience is more of a technical score. How complex were those flavors? How deep were those flavors? What was the mouth feel? What was the length of the finish? All of these are important to us as we're thinking through what are our favorite whiskeys. So what you see on the screen as an example is if we rated half of the metrics an 8, half of the metrics a 9, it would even out into an 85. Essentially, you just add all 10 scores together, and it gives you then a score out of 100. So what we can do and what we've learned over time then is where these whiskeys fall and how we feel about them. So if something was to score between 0 to 59, just don't drink it. It's just not worth your time. If it's between a 60 and a 69, and a lot of the times these are the budget bourbons, we would call it below average, but it might still have some highlights. It might have its own place, either as a mixer or as a Dora cup glass or whatever you want the reason there, something that you don't want to think about. 70 to 79 is average. And then as you go up from there, 80 to 84, kind of making its own subgroup here, is a really good whiskey. 85 to 89, you start getting into that very excited, great territory. And then anything over 90 is just excellent. I mean, you're talking about something that scored all 9s and 10s on those metrics that I had earlier. So thus far, we have over 280 reviews logged since January of 2023. And this isn't on purpose. What we're actually starting to see is this bell curve develop between all of our reviews, where the center point there is that 80 to 84 score. Those are the ones that we search for, and those are the ones that we most commonly hit with our reviews. and then you can see it tail down on either ends of that. The outliers, or the ones that we really look for, the unicorns, are the excellent pours, and we've only found 32 of those thus far. And those are the real standouts there. We're talking the William LaRuellers, the ECBP Pirate Barrels, the George T. Staggs. I mean, we're talking some really escalated pours if you're getting into the 90s, and not too many of those exist. But when you look at this, though, the scores say nothing about the price paid. So, what we're able to do then with all of this information is to look at the average score across everything that we've ever reviewed and split it then by some price breaks to see if there is a correlation between price and quality. Now, the average score that you see over on the left is an 82 out of 100. So, generally speaking, we are searching for things that fall in that 82, 84 range to drink most often. We know those type of whiskeys exist across all price points. That's what we search for. Now, as we work our way up the price points, starting with less than $25, so the sample size here is only 7, you can see that the average score on something that inexpensive is a 70. So good pours, but usually those are held back by a lack of complexity. Typically, when it comes to something, let's say the JW Dant, that is a great $18 pour. Evan Williams Bottle and Bond be another one. Great $18, $20 pour. While the flavors are delicious, it just kind of lacks complexity, and then that's what holds the score back. The finish might not be there because these are typically watered down comparatively to anything barrel proof. As you step up then into $26 to $40, you can see there's a bit of an increase in average score, but still sitting there at a 73, just a lot of good whiskeys. Where things then start to escalate is at $41 to $60, and then it escalates a bit more at $61 to $80, and then essentially plateaus. So it escalates for a bit. So there is a point in this equation where price and quality is correlated, but then you got that plateau that goes on. And I'm going to show you a scatter plot here in just a moment, because it's not plateauing because everything is hitting around these areas when it comes to the averages. It's plateauing because a whole lot of things also disappoint us at those higher price points. Now, there is a noticeable uptick, though, at the $150 plus. Those are the ones that, on average, score the highest at an 85 average. But keep in mind, those are also where we are our pickiest. So we are typically not just buying any bottle willy-nilly just because we haven't had it before. When we are going in to a high-priced whiskey like that, we either have a lot of faith in the brand, or we have talked to other people that are recommending that and that it's so expensive. But still, though, the thing that I do want to highlight is, regardless if your budget is around $40, $60, $80, $100, you can find high quality, good to great whiskeys, even on average. You just got to know where to look and what brands to look for. And that is where resources such as this channel, other Whiskey Tube channels, come into play. Get to know some of the brands and then figure out which of those brands are even offered in your state and area, because I know that can vary as well. Though online retailers can come in handy for this, though you do have to put in the shipping costs when it comes to engaging with the online retailers. So, really, to highlight then what happens behind the scenes and how, there really isn't this linear equation going on, this linear relationship between score and price. Every single dot that you see on the screen right now represents a review that Kelsey Durrell and I have done with the price and the score plotted. So, if you take something all the way on the left, you're talking about the lowest scoring bottle being around a 57 out of 100, but costing $110. And as we walk through that, you can see a lot of lower price whiskeys score really high, and we'll go through some examples of what those bottles are in just a moment. ultimately why we hunt and what we hunt is something that falls in this sweet spot that I am highlighting right here, which is bottles that cost below $100 but are scoring 80 or higher. And for every point that they score higher than 80, oh, that is just the icing on top. That is just the cherry on top. If you get something that's above an 85, above a 90, and you're paying less than $100 for it, you're starting to talk unicorn category. Now, examples of bottles that are fitting in this particular box would be things like Frey Ranch single barrel, Bardstown Bourbon Company single barrel, both of these running around $80, $85. One that was a surprise last year, the Copper and Kings Finnish Bourbon and Apple Brandy. This was 65, scored about an 82 if memory serves. One thing that scores consistent just for $85 are Russell Reserve picks. But even if you can't get picks, we are huge fans of Wild Turkey Rare Breed. Once again, something that's going to run you $60. It scored an 82 in our scoring system, at least for this particular batch at the time. I'm sure there's a little bit of a variance there. There are also great MGP single barrels that come at good ages that don't cost that much. Here's an 8-year copper cask. I believe this one was 70. Barrel puts out some good picks. Here's a 9-year MGP single barrel. This one cost me $90. And then there's some tried and true ones. For $65, you can get a great Woodford Reserve pick. Another example of something that scored between an 80 to an 82. And then another one that consistently scores high would be Knob Creek single barrels. These 9-year picks are really good. This particular one is the best single barrel Knob Creek I've ever had. I believe our score was a 90, or at least mine was. But the other guy scored this one pretty high too, in the upper 80s. So those are examples of a lot of bottles that would be taking place in this quadrant that I'm highlighting here. Now, one question that I have gotten a few times is, can we find something that is scoring in the 80s or higher that costs less than $50? That actually doesn't happen too often. One brand that I will highlight that recently Kelsey did a review on is Chattanooga 111 for $45. I think he gave it an 81. That is a very, very good bottle. So you can see that they exist here, but the dots aren't as plentiful in this green box that I'm highlighting now compared to that $50 to $100 range. It's a lot easier to find single barrels and standout whiskeys in that 50 to 100 than 50 and below, but they do exist. Now, other thing to highlight here is anything above 100 that scores less than an 80. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, we try to go in to these purchases as, as frugal as we can in a lot of ways. I mean, spending any more than $100 on a bottle of whiskey is a commitment. That's an investment. There's an opportunity cost there if you miss. And we do get burned, despite what we know, despite what we look into, despite the recommendations that we get every now and then. We do get burned by the hype, by the marketing, by a label, by our own curiosity. And every time we get burned by a bottle that costs more than $100 that's scoring in this range, it makes us more skeptical of future purchases. Now, if you go all the way up to the top there, look at the $300 and $350 ones that scored between a 75 and an 80. That is painful. I know one of those there, pretty close to that red line, as an example, would be the Master's Keep Voyage that cost me $275. That one burns, and it pretty much diminished the Master Keep brand in my head going forward. But it doesn't just diminish the Master Keep brand. It really diminishes all whiskey in general, and me spending that much money. It makes me very nervous now to pull the trigger, knowing how many times I have been burned at these various price points. So that walks through then the relationship between price and quality, quality in terms of our scores. As you can see there, you can find good to great whiskey anywhere above that $40 price point. Is particularly easier if you're looking to spend $50 to $100, but there really isn't much reason to go beyond that. You are paying an escalating amount of dollars for just a little smidgen more when it comes to the quality. Nearly everything does plateau on average once you get above a certain price point. And it's important for us to remember that, particularly as whiskey hobbyists and enthusiasts. We don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy this hobby. We just have to know what to look for, rely on whiskey friends, rely on word of mouth, and not make the same mistake that others are making. So hopefully that answers all your questions in regards to the relationship between price and quality. If you have any follow-up questions on this topic, let me know in the comments. We'll get to it in a future video. So thank you for joining us today, whiskey friends. We'll catch you on the next Tuesday discussion. Goodbye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me.